Hello, we are continuing to highlight innovations that have occurred at the College of Veterinary Medicine. Joining me today is Dr. Jody Gookin. Hi, Dr. Gookin.
Hey, Kyle.
So let's start with a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, Jody Gookin. I am a small animal internal medicine veterinarian. I practice here at North Carolina State University. I have an interest in gastroenterology, did a PhD in gastroenterology, and I teach gastroenterology, and I do research in gastroenterology, and with a special interest in infectious diseases of the GI tract, particularly in cats, and infectious diseases that cause diarrhea.
Interesting, and that's kind of the area where your innovation touches upon, correct?
Yes, it does. Yep.
Tell us about it.
Okay, I'll tell you about it. So, much akin to Dr. Birkenhauer's story, mine started when I was in training. So I'm a veterinarian and I'm training to become a specialist in internal medicine. And one day I see a patient, happens to be a Bengal cat, and the complaint by the owner is chronic diarrhea. And we took this cat, and what was unusual about this cat was that the diarrhea was colitis. So, and like it's signs associated with like irritated colon, which is not that typical as far as how cats present with diarrhea. So that kind of caught my eye. We ran lots of tests on this cat to try to figure out what was going on. And the only thing we could find was when we looked at the cat's feces directly under a microscope, that it was full of these highly motile protozoa organisms. And in vet school, the only protozoa I ever learned that were present in the GI tract were Giardia. And I could tell that these were not Giardia, and I didn't know what they were, and there was a lot of them. So I reached out to Mike Levy, who was our parasitologist at NC State, and he looked at them, and he told me that, no, those aren't Giardia, those are trichomonads. And trichomonads they're not pathogenic, they're commensals, they're found in some animals when they have diarrhea for other reasons, and they're not pathogens, and so you should not worry about them, and you should look for something else. Well, I looked for everything else, I couldn't find anything else. And I looked in the literature, and aside from a recent description of a similar cat in Washington State, nobody had used the word trichomonas in a publication for the last 60 years. And I'm just like, I don't buy it. If this was something that was non-pathogenic, that overgrows in cats with diarrhea, then I'd have heard about it in vet school, and someone would have said, oh, if you see these, don't worry about them or whatnot. So long story short, I didn't believe him, and it bugged me a lot. And so I thought, wow, this could really be being missed. The only way I saw these was under a microscope. I looked at the feces under a microscope. Most vets don't do that anymore. They'll send it off for flotation. They'll even do PCR tests and things, but they're not going to like look at it under a microscope anymore. So maybe it's being missed. And about the same time, one of our technicians worked for a rescue agency that took care of orphan cats and things like that. And she said they're having a problem with diarrhea. And I'm like, well, describe the diarrhea. And she described it. It sounded like colitis. And I'm like, I wonder if those cats could have this thing. So I grabbed a microscope on a weekend and went out there to where these cats were and started looking at their feces under the microscope. And lo and behold, they all had these protozoa. So after that, I went ahead collaborating with Mike Levy, and we figured out that this trichomonad was not a commensal trichomonad. It was actually identified as Trichomonas fetus. I went on with the help of Ed Brightswort to do proof of disease causation studies where we infected cats with pure cultures of the organism and showed that it alone was able to cause diarrhea. And then with the help of Adam Birkenhauer, we were both grad students, he helped me develop a PCR-based diagnostic test for the infection that's now used by all the major veterinary diagnostic labs all over the world. And since then, with the help of Mark Papich in particular, we've identified the only known effective treatment for the infection. So it's been like a 20-year journey with probably over 20 original research publications. The infection is recognized worldwide. It's arguably probably the most common infectious cause of colitis and diarrhea in the domestic cat. And there's still a lot of work yet to be done in terms of understanding how it causes diarrhea and identifying even more effective treatments for it. And so we continue on the journey to this day.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Sure, thanks. It was nice to spend this time with you, Kyle.
Thank you. And